Hey YouTube, how are we going to treat our water if we have dirty water? Something that I always think about sometimes when I'm drinking a glass of water. And I'm like, man, if this was dirty, what the freak would I do? And luckily, my water isn't dirty, but one day it could be. If you're put in situations that you had to deal with more, how should you say, non-conventional water sources. And so let's go down this list and just say, hey, you don't have to have all these, put up in a cache in your house or in your vehicle. I mean, you don't need like 7 ways to deal with water filtration or purification. But it is good to, consider maybe having more than one. Let's just say it that way. Because you never know. Certain situations may require a higher level of water filtration than maybe just your traditional tap water that is typically already pretty good, even though there's a lot of places, depending on where you live, that, do add a bunch of crap in there like fluoride and chlorine and have known to not be really the safest source because during the, let's just say, the reuse or the recycling of the water from the sewage treatment plants, it's been known that a lot of pharmaceuticals do get slipped by, and so their filters do not take it out. So there's a lot of problems, especially in larger cities that use the recycled water. There's a lot of trace amounts of pharmaceutical prescription grade medicines, but I digress. So the whole thing here is to just be mindful of how to get the bulk of the crap out of the water, and at least enough so that you won't get sick, and especially for an emergency, if you have to get through a hard time in your life, at least you have some options that won't, end up in, you being extremely sick from it. And so let's get into it. To distill your water is a great way to do it. That's a very simple way. Of course, you just need to understand the mechanics of that. Basically, you're harvesting the steam from a water source that's been boiled, and you're waiting and letting it to the steam as cool down and turn from a gas to a liquid, and you're capturing it. Now, you just remember though the minerals are going to be pretty much not going to be there. I mean, it's going to be filtered out in a sense from that whole stage of gas to liquid, but there also could be possibilities of certain oils and such that could evaporate. They may have similar, evaporation temperatures as water. So just know that it's not 100% solid on that. But it does work for the majority of water sources, I have to say. So distilled water, and you could even do a solar condensation type system if you're into that. Look that up. Just another option. The next is to boil your water. Now, just remember when you boil your water, you're going to lose some water from the steam. And secondly, if there's any contaminants that are going to be inorganic, such as mercury, lead, fluoride, anything else, pesticides, you're only going to actually increase the density or the concentration of that in the water because the steam is going to evaporate, and so that's not going to work. But it'll kill the organisms if you steam it for a couple of minutes. Let it boil, I should say. But just be mindful that if you want to, you can put a cover, put a cover over the pot, so you can minimize the steam and your water loss. But anyways, just remember that you can't get out the things that don't evaporate. And the things that aren't killed from, boiling water. So boiling your water is limited. And believe it or not, it's not always the best way to go. But if you know that your water source is pretty decent and you're just worried about there might be some parasites or a little bit of bacteria in there, boiling the water is the way to go. The next is to use a traditional filter. Now, most people would think right off the bat, ceramic filter. And that's pretty much the most common way. But there's nano filters, like they use nanotube technology and so forth. Pretty much the sky's the limit with filters. I would look into filters that also are considered purification devices. So you want a water purifier, which is even better. So it can give you that much more capability to get all the crap out. because filtration and purification are two different things. UV light. Ultraviolet light really does kill a lot of microbiology, and I can tell you that it's a great option. But once again, if there's other funk in there, such as pesticides, mercury, lead, and other kind of things that you don't want, the light isn't going to make that go away. It just kills the microorganisms, and that's it. You can actually have UV lights or even put things in containers out in the sun for a period of time, typically 24 hours in bright sunlight or 2 days in overcast to kill the great bulk, if not almost all, of those contaminants. But once again, you're not really going to be for sure if you got it all. So you do run a risk. So UV light is kind of, for me, something I don't really play with, but they sure do use it a lot in third world countries, and they have a lot of success. The next is chlorine. Now, this is probably the last one that I would pick on the list, but I had to mention it because it is useful in an emergency. But I would have to say, though, that I just don't like the idea of putting this chemical in my body. It definitely isn't healthy to do put chlorine in your body. I'm totally against this in the municipal sources, but hey, they do it anyways, just like fluoride. And so what we have is that chlorine in the liquid or tablet form could be used. And typically you wait a period of time depending on the concentration. So you want to look into that. And I'd say that it's better to do this with chlorine than to die of dehydration. So that's all I can say about that. Number 6 would be to do your own filter, DIY. Do it yourself. And you can create from, like, just for example, using a 5-gallon bucket and drill holes in the bottom and just layer it, with the heavier material on bottom, like your rocks and gravel, and build up from there. You could have some sand in the middle, some charcoal in the toward the top portion, maybe different layers of grass, and maybe another layer of sand on the top, and basically create your own drip filter, a gravity-fed filter. You're not going to be guaranteed to get everything out, but man, you could probably get quite a bit out, if not the very, very large majority of things out that way. And so the last one, I like this one better than chlorine, and it's iodine. You do have to be kind of careful over long-term use. It can affect the thyroid, but the iodine, that's definitely a good way to go too. But once again, just like other choices that we just talked about, if there's other contaminants in there, it doesn't really affect them. It doesn't get them out. So it just basically, if you already have, like, pretty much it looks clean and you don't see stuff floating around and you know for sure that there's no, like, heavy metals and pesticides and all this other stuff in there, you're just worried that maybe there's a little bit of bacteria, possibly maybe some viruses and things like that, then maybe iodine would be okay for you. But once again, though, man, you have to be careful with all this. You have to learn about how much iodine, just like how much chlorine, and how long to wait after you treat the water to consume it. And there's also different techniques to know if you have enough in there, typically by smell. So you want to check into all this more. Thanks for your time. I'll catch you later.